Tonight's story begins with a structure. One so vast, so technically ridiculous, and so stubbornly Roman that it still makes modern engineers squint and rub their eyes. So, before you settle in, take a quiet moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what happens here. And in the comments, whisper where you're listening from and what time your clock reads. It is strangely comforting to imagine this same story drifting through bedrooms, buses, and lonely study tables all over the world at all hours of the night. Now, dim the lights. Let the room cool down. Maybe let a fan hum gently in the background, that soft, mechanical sigh that makes thoughts move slower. Breathe, ease your shoulders, and let tonight's hazy little history wrap itself around you. Because if you want to understand the Colosseum, you do not begin with architecture, journals, or engineering diagrams. You begin with something far more Roman and far more petty. You begin with resentment, with ego, with one emperor trying very hard to erase the memory of another. The Colosseum was not born out of love, civic harmony, or a refined passion for the arts. It was born out of spite. It was a monument to not him. To understand why, you have to meet Nero, the human embodiment of a midlife crisis stretched into imperial form. In Nero's mind, Rome's real problem was not famine, corruption, or the occasional citywide inferno. The problem, as he saw it, was the tragic absence of a gigantic private lake for his glittering pleasure palace. So he cleared entire neighborhoods from the map, displaced thousands of people, and carved a shimmering artificial lake into the heart of the city like a bruise. Stand into this absurd landscape stepped Vespasian, practical, unsentimental, and very aware that Rome was tired of Nero's theatrics. His solution was brutal in its simplicity. Destroy Nero's lake, fill it in, and on top of that watery vanity project, build a 50,000-seat theater of controlled violence. It was the ancient Roman equivalent of wiping your predecessor's hard drive and replacing the desktop wallpaper with a moving, high-definition portrait of yourself. It was not subtle. It was not modest. It was, quite simply, the largest architectural middle finger Rome had ever raised. By selecting this precise spot, Nero's old backyard Vespasian sent a message so loud that it reverberated through stone. Remember that spoiled maniac who nearly bankrupted Rome? Exactly. Neither do we. The people loved him for it. There is a timeless political trick at work here. Nothing makes citizens forgive chaos quite as quickly as free entertainment, free food, and front row seats to a very public, very theatrical kind of justice, bread and circuses. The formula has not expired. The scale of the project alone felt like overcompensation. Hundreds of thousands of tons of stone, entire armies of engineers, craftsmen, quarrymen, day laborers, and enslaved people, all pulled into a single gravitational field of ambition. The Colosseum was, at its core, a message. Rome is back. Construction began around the year 70 CE on a site that had recently been a lake. The ground had to be drained, stabilized, leveled, and packed, because water does not easily forget where it once lived. Rome, however, was a civilization that specialized in telling nature to sit down and behave. Where modern planners would spend months testing soil and writing anxious reports, the Romans simply decided, drain it, and start stacking stone. In the end, the Colosseum was not just a building, it was psychological warfare carved in limestone. It was a public apology and a public distraction, a morale booster and a power flex, all wrapped into one immense elliptical shell. Some empires built temples to flatter their gods. Rome built stadiums to flatter its people, to entertain them, to control them, and to quietly erase its own mistakes. This was not just engineering. This was revenge set in stone. Once Vespasian committed to the ancient world's largest revenge project, Rome did what Rome always did when provoked. It overperformed. The Colosseum was not designed merely to impress. It was designed to make every other civilization feel quietly inadequate. Egypt had pyramids, mysterious, but without numbered seats. Caves had graceful theaters where people debated ideas and watched tragedies, but no one wrestled lions there. Quote, Persia had glittering palaces, but none of them could host a naval battle in the morning and a mass execution before sunset. The Colosseum was built with the energy of a civilization that woke up each day and chose violence and good urban planning. The first design requirement was simple: make it enormous. At its peak, the Colosseum could hold around 50,000 spectators, sometimes more, a staggering number in the ancient world. It was like constructing a modern stadium the size of a mid-tier arena and filling it with tens of thousands of people who had never heard of personal space, deodorant, or crowd barriers. And the Romans did not only build big, they built fast. Construction started under Vespasian in the 70s CE. By around 80 CE, crowds were already spilling into the stands, sloshing cheap wine onto brand new stone. Meanwhile, modern projects can spend years arguing about a single parking garage. Rome handled it with a much shorter to-do list: drain lake, move rocks, stack rocks, tie rocks together with iron. Finished. From the outside, the Colosseum rises like a colossal stone wedding cake baked for society with severe aggression issues. 4 stories tall, ringed with arches, and dressed in 3 different orders of columns: Doric at the bottom, Tauric in the middle, Corinthian at the top. It is as if the architects could not decide on a single aesthetic and chose to wear all their favorite outfits at once. On paper, that sounds chaotic. In practice, it looks like confidence hardened into geometry. And beneath that beauty, there is a cool, merciless practicality. Those arches were not decorative frills. They were working parts of a machine. Each arch is a load-bearing, stress-distributing, earthquake-resisting curve. Each one takes pressure, not just from above, but from its neighbors, sharing the burden sideways in a careful chain. Imagine a circle of exhausted officials quietly passing their problems to the person next to them. That is how the Colosseum's exterior stands, each arch trusting the next until the weight dissolves into balance. The Romans also added something wonderfully named vomitoria, huge tunnel-like corridors that allowed tens of thousands of people to enter and exit the building in astonishingly short time. Despite the name, they were not rooms for convenient vomiting after too much wine. The word comes from the idea of crowds being poured out rapidly into or out of the structure. Practical, efficient, and just a little revolting as an image perfectly Roman. The Colosseum was more than a stadium. It was a public announcement written in stone. Rome is wealthy. Rome is powerful. Rome is restless. And Rome wants you to see it. If you have ever stood near its broken walls and wondered how this shell of arches still stands while modern apartment walls crack when you lean on them, that answer lies in the material flowing through its bones: Roman concrete, an ancient building substance that behaves almost like a living thing, changing and strengthening with time. Unlike the modern cement that flakes and crumbles under weather and salt, Roman concrete behaves as if it is participating in its own survival. It was made from volcanic ash, lime, aggregates, water, and a level of imperial confidence bordering on arrogance. Over centuries, the mixture generates new crystals inside its own pores, making it tougher as it ages rather than weaker. Humans grow older and discover back pain. Roman concrete grows older and becomes more stubborn. Scientists today quietly obsess over it, examining tiny cores from ancient structures and asking, almost incredulously, how it can still be holding together after nearly 2,000 years. The Romans sourced volcanic ash from areas like Pezuali near Naples, where a restless supervolcanic landscape provided exactly the kind of mineral powder they needed. They blended that ash with lime, pressed and poured the mixture into wooden forms, and watched it harden into a material that could shrug off earthquakes, storms, fires, riots, and centuries of tourists chipping at it for souvenirs. Beneath the Colosseum lies an enormous circular foundation of concrete, roughly 12 meters deep in places, carrying the building onto the drained lakebed Nero once admired from his private palace, where a modern project would stall in hearings and paperwork. The Romans simply acknowledged that the ground was a bit soggy and built there anyway. But their genius did not end with what they poured. It extended to how they layered and combined materials. They built a solid concrete core and wrapped it in heavy blocks of travertine limestone, held together with metal clamps like stitches in stone. These iron ties helped the outer shell behave as a single unit when the ground shifted. And the concrete inside was not a single uniform block. It was layered, carefully adjusted in density and flexibility from level to level. In effect, they baked the world's first anti-earthquake cake, each slice of structure designed to absorb shock, to flex and settle instead of snapping instantly. When tremors shook Rome, many buildings cracked or failed. The Colosseum groaned, swayed, and then simply kept existing. 2 millennia later, the Colosseum remains cracked, scarred, missing entire sections of its outer ring, yet defiantly alive. It stands like an immortal Roman grandmother, indestructible, unimpressed, and silently judging every glass tower that has gone up and fallen down in the centuries since. If Roman concrete was the muscle of the Colosseum, then the arches were its skeleton. But unlike your skeleton, which complains loudly every time it gets out of bed, this skeleton was designed to stay calm under pressure. The Romans did not merely use arches, they weaponized them. They embraced the idea that curves could be stronger than rigid lines, a truth that seems strangely forgotten when you look at rows of modern, flat-walled office blocks. The Colosseum has hundreds of exterior arches, precisely spaced and almost smug in their regularity. Together, they form a giant stone ribcage that has endured earthquakes, storms, invasions, and the unending parade of visitors craning their necks and pretending to understand what they are seeing. The building seems to shrug at gravity, as if the force pulling everything down is more of an occasional suggestion than a binding rule. The secret lies in how arches distribute weight. Instead of pushing force straight down into one point, K spread it sideways along their curve, sending it into the next arch and the next. A shared load that rarely crushes any single stone. It is like a group expected to carry a heavy secret. No one person has to bear it alone. Inside the Colosseum, this rhythm of arches continues. One level of arcades sits on top of another, 3 tiers high. It's decorated with its own style of column Doric, then Ionic, then Corinthian, because Rome preferred to demonstrate fluency rather than choose a single architectural language. It's beyond aesthetics. Those arches lock into vaults, a honeycomb of corridors, stairs, and supporting spaces. The interior feels like someone asked, how many tunnels can we fit into a single building? And Rome calmly answered, all of them. These corridors guided crowds, supported seating, carried the forces of the structure safely down to the ground. When earthquakes rolled through the city, the Colosseum's network of arches and vaults flexed and redistributed the motion where another structure might crumble. This one simply shifted its weight and carried on with the day's schedule of spectacle and blood. It is worth remembering that the Colosseum was not even Rome's first attempt at a large amphitheater. The Romans had already experimented with smaller versions across the empire, tuning the recipe, adjusting the curves, learning how stone and crowds behave together. The Colosseum was the final boss of that evolution, the amphitheater that graduated top of its class and then quietly outlived nearly every rival. Later centuries were less respectful. During the Middle Ages, stone cutters and builders treated the Colosseum as a convenient quarry. Blocks were stripped away to build churches and palaces. Large chunks of the outer ring vanished, and yet, even half pillaged, the remaining arches stand with a kind of exhausted dignity, damaged, but still more structurally stable than most people's inner lives. Because the Romans were not only master builders, they were master organizers of human chaos. If you can move 50,000 sunburned, hungry, emotionally volatile people, many of them armed with opinions, and cheap wine through a single building without everything turning instantly into a riot, you have earned your empire. The Colosseum was not just an arena for combat, it was a masterpiece of crowd control. Its vomitoria and layered corridors allowed vast audiences to enter, teat, find their seats, and leave again in surprisingly short order. Tickets, seating sections, and entrances were arranged so precisely that the whole place functioned almost like a mechanical device made from people, stone, and time. So as you drift toward sleep, picture it, dawn over Rome, the pale light catching on row after row of arches. The old lake long gone, replaced by this vast shell of stone, concrete, and memory. Workers waking early, oiling gears and pulleys below the arena floor. Vendors setting up to feed the crowds. Citizens streaming through corridors that swallow and then pour them out into the stands. Above them all, the great ring of the Colosseum, still standing, still breathing slowly through its arches, still whispering the same message it sent on the first day it opened. Rome has returned. Rome has learned from its humiliation, and Rome would very much like you to sit down, look at the arena, and forget for a little while everything that hurts outside these walls. Then, like now, that was sometimes all people wanted. A machine designed to swallow tens of thousands of Roman peasants, nobles, merchants, drunks, pickpockets, even senators, pretending to slum it among the crowd, then spit them all back out within minutes, efficiently and safely, without anyone getting trampled by an overly eager gladiator fan. The secret lay in the vomitoria. No, not rooms for puking, despite what the internet jokes about. A vomitorium does not mean a chamber for vomiting after overeating grapes. It literally means a place that spews people out. The Romans invented the world's first people fountains. The Colosseum had 80 entrances, each numbered just like a modern stadium, because even in 80 CE, someone realized that 50,000 people wandering around asking, "Is this my seat?" would only lead to chaos. Spectators were handed tickets, a truly adorable concept when you consider this ticketing system was invented for events where half the participants ended up dead. But the genius wasn't just in the entrances. It was in the flow of complex web of corridors, ramps, staircases, and passageways that guided spectators exactly where they needed to be. Wealthy patrons enjoyed express lanes straight to the best seats, of course, while the less fortunate were funneled up narrow staircases into the nosebleed sections where they squinted at the carnage below, pretending to enjoy it. The Romans were masters of vertical segregation. Rich people sat close enough to smell the gladiators, and the poor far enough away to smell the pigeons. Everyone behaved thanks to the Colosseum's design, a stone maze where traffic moved smoothly, whether people wanted it to or not. But what truly sets the Colosseum apart is the speed of its exits. Thanks to carefully angled corridors and rapid dispersal design, the entire crowd of 50,000 could empty the arena in just 5 to 10 minutes. Modern stadiums, built with all the advantages of computers, algorithms, and fire codes, still struggle to match that. Rome solved crowd flow with arches, concrete, and raw, unapologetic spite. The Colosseum wasn't just a building, it was the prototype for every major stadium, theater, subway station, and airport terminal since sand. It actually worked. If the arena floor was the Colosseum's face, then beneath it lay the hypogeum, the underground complex, its brain, heart, nervous system, and slightly deranged imagination. Above, you saw gladiators, animals, and scenery. Below, there lurked the ancient Roman backstage chaos, only with more chains, less sleep, and considerably higher chances of being eaten. The hypogeum was a 2-story labyrinth of tunnels, chambers, cages, ramps, corridors, and machinery. Like someone told a Roman engineer, build a dungeon, a zoo, and a theater backstage all at once, and the engineer replied, say no more. It stretched beneath the entire arena floor. A secret hive where hundreds of enslaved workers labored in darkness, guiding animals, kept prepping gladiators, hauling props, and making sure nothing exploded at the wrong moment. Lions paced restlessly in wooden cages. Bears growled in the dark. Wolves, boars, leopards, and even ostriches waited in cramped stalls, all wondering which genius decided they'd be entertainment today. Gladiators moved through these corridors, too, sometimes limping, sometimes praying, sometimes staring down a tiger and reconsidering their career choices. The place pulsed with the sounds of creaking mechanisms, snarling beasts, and men shouting over each other like a frantic ancient production crew, desperate to keep the show on schedule. The machinery was astonishing. Wooden elevators, powered by counterweights and human muscle, could lift entire cages or sets straight through the arena floor. Imagine being a gladiator, standing in pitch blackness on a platform, hands shaking, as a dozen slaves below pull ropes, groaning like dying oxen. Then, suddenly, the platform shoots upwards, the trapdoor bursts open, and you're thrust into the sun, surrounded by 50,000 screaming Romans, expecting you to fight something that would rather not be there, either. But it wasn't just animals and gladiators making dramatic entrances. The crew also lifted entire miniature forests, trees, rocks, even fabricated hills to transform the arena into different landscapes. A sandy battlefield in the morning could become a wild woodland by noon. Scenic design centuries before theater directors had learned how to shout at interns. Entering the Hypogeum must have felt like stepping into a fever dream. The heat, noise, and smell of wood, sweat, straw, decay, and fear all mingled, a mixture of organized chaos, mostly organized, often chaotic, always dangerous. If the Colosseum was Rome's dazzling showpiece, the Hypogeum beneath was its secret engine, room hidden, complex, and utterly unhinged. For many modern engineers, the part that inspires awe, or perhaps deep breath and hesitation, is the elevators. Yes, real elevators, not metaphorical, but ingenious platforms designed to lift animals, scenery, and sometimes very befuddled gladiators straight through the arena floor. Remember, this was the first century. No electricity, no hydraulics, no steel cables, just wood, rope, counterweights, muscle, and the kind of problem solving driven by an emperor's absolute command. The system was nearly comically complex. Dozens of vertical shafts beneath the wooden floor, each contained a platform attached to a labyrinth of pulleys and winches powered by groups of enslaved workers turning massive capstans, giant human hamster wheels. Each lift required 8 to 12 men in perfect sync. If one faltered, the entire platform could jerk to the side, turning what should have been a grand lion reveal into a dangerous accident. Imagine the scene: a lion pacing in dark, twitching with adrenaline. The platform begins to rise, creaking like a haunted barn door. Below, the slaves grunt, pulling thick ropes. Pained. Then the trapdoor bursts open, sunlight hitting the lion's face as 50,000 Romans collectively gasp in amazement. These lifts weren't reserved for animals alone. Gladiators made dramatic entrances through them too, sometimes alone, sometimes in pairs, sometimes surrounded by scenery, plastic forests, rocks, even the world's saddest imitation of a woodland. These entrances were planned with the precision of a Broadway show and the mortal risk of a chainsaw juggling act. Everything depended on perfect timing. One misstep could send a platform crashing back into darkness. History tells us that Romans were not forgiving when expensive animals or prized gladiators fell like sacks of grain. The workers in this underground maze lived in constant tension, always one snapped rope away from turning the Hypogeum into a flattened zoo. Yet, the system ran smoothly, time after time, with hundreds of flawless lifts during games. It proved that Romans were not merely good builders. They were masters of movement, of making stone and muscle dance together. Colosseum didn't just show violence, it staged it, choreographed it, and lifted it dramatically into view. Just when you might think the Romans couldn't make the Colosseum any more extravagant. They did something that sounds like a fever dream. They flooded it, completely, intentionally, and repeatedly. This was no plumbing mishap or random flood, it was deliberate engineering by people who looked at the world's greatest amphitheater and said, what it really needs is boats. These staged sea battles, or naumachia, were Rome's way of flexing their dominion over both land and water and their love of extravagant entertainment. Flooding the arena required hydraulic engineering still admired today. Aqueduct channels were ingeniously routed beneath the arena through hidden pipes, allowing the whole floor to fill with water deep enough for specially designed flat-bottomed ships. But Romans didn't fill the arena slowly. They poured it with the theatrical impatience typical of a civilization that invented indoor plumbing just to show off. The transformation was swift. One moment, the battlefield was sandy and bloodstained. The next, it shimmered like a vast lake dotted with tiny islands. Props floated serenely. Miniatures bobbed gently amid the splash and roar of the crowd, whose mood shifted from bloodthirsty to delighted confusion. Are we sailing today? One might have asked, and the answer was yes. The naval battles were pure spectacle, the earliest recorded historical reenactments, with prisoners of war and condemned criminals forced to fight famous sea battles. Small wooden ships clashed as thousands cheered, loving this dangerous, aquatic madness. However, this aquatic theatrics came at a cost. Flooding the arena damaged the wooden floor. The hypogeum below wearied the staff and probably wrecked the morale of the officers in charge of cleanup. Eventually, the Romans realized that maintaining a pop-up lake inside a stone amphitheater was expensive, impractical, and caused persistent mold. The water battles faded as quickly as they began. Still, for a brief, glorious moment, the Colosseum was not just a brutal theater of blood, it was a sparkling marine park. A huge stone bathtub of imperial arrogance, a swimming pool paid for by the Roman treasury and fueled by questionable decision-making. Rome did not just build a stadium. It built a venue capable of hosting football matches, naval battles, and existential crises, sometimes all before lunch. And if Rome had one weakness, it was its inability to stop at enough. Animals, gladiators, and naval battles weren't quite enough. No, they needed dramatic scenery. Scenery that rose magically from beneath the floor, like a theater stage managed by caffeinated demigods. The Colosseum wasn't a stadium, it was an ancient special effects studio. Centuries before Hollywood knew how to blow things up on purpose. Beneath the arena floor, nestled within the hypogeum's labyrinth of tunnels and platforms, stood a collection of wooden frames, painted backdrops, portable forests, artificial rocks, and the earliest set decorations imaginable. When the Romans wanted to transform a battlefield into a desert, a forest, or a mountain range, all they had to do was attach props to the elevators, cue the backstage workers, and voila. Instant scenery. Imagine being a gladiator, squinting in the darkness below, waiting to be lifted suddenly up into the arena, surrounded by a plastic forest crafted with the desperate artistry of a man who had slept in 3 days. This was the Colosseum, an ancient world of staggering engineering, brutal spectacle, and theatrical magic, all built to both awe and subdue the restless heart of Rome. Meanwhile, the audience gasps as though witnessing divine intervention. Yet, beneath it all, what they truly witness is the blood, sweat, and tears of an entire workforce fueled by stale bread and sheer fear. The very same elevator network that lifted animals and gladiators also hoisted intricate scenery. One moment, the arena floor was a flat expanse of sand. The next, a lush forest sprang forth, dotted with shrubs, fake trees, and even the occasional real tree someone swiped from a nearby villa. The Romans cared little for botanical accuracy. Spectacle was their sole aim. If it looked enough like nature, that was sufficient. Some lifts carried life-sized props, a small hut here, a miniature temple there crafted for elaborate mythological reenactments. Condemned criminals were forced into these performances, portraying tragic heroes like Orpheus or Hercules, usually meeting very grim ends. This could be called ancient method acting. The precision required for those scenic changes was astonishing. Trapdoors, platforms, timing, actors, even the occasional wild animal escaping its cage, all had to align perfectly. This entire production teetered on the brink of disaster, yet, time and again, the Romans pulled it off. They created the illusion of magic long before stagecraft held a name. For the audience, the show was dazzling. For the workers below, chaos reigned. For Rome, it was yet another triumph proof that given a giant arena, they filled it with everything but modesty. If you've ever braved a Roman summer, you know the sun doesn't gently shine. It assaults you, melts you, turns you into a human raisin within minutes. Imagine sitting in that heat, packed among 50,000 sweaty Romans, all waiting for the gladiator show to begin. The Romans knew such conditions could spark riots, so they engineered what sounds like a fantasy, the velarium, a giant retractable sunshade covering 2/3 of the Colosseum. This wasn't a simple canvas tarp. It was a vast network of sails, ropes, pulleys, and masts so complex that only one group in the empire had the expertise to operate it, the Imperial Navy. Yes, actual sailors. Imagine telling a naval commander that his new mission was battling pirates, but adjusting a huge umbrella for sweaty civilians. These men trained for warfare became masters of climate control, hauling enormous sailcloth panels stretched over wooden poles anchored atop the Colosseum. Ropes crisscrossed like a giant spiderweb, and when fully unfurled, the velarium filtered sunlight, cooled the stands with directed breezes, and softened the brightness. Simply put, ancient Rome invented stadium climate control using sailors, ropes, and determination. Operating the velarium was no small feat. Every breeze threatened to turn the canopy into a deadly parachute. Sudden gusts risked snapping ropes, bending timbers, or flinging sailors off their platforms. Managing this required hundreds of men, flawless timing, constant communication, and no small amount of courage. Yet, the Romans made it seem effortless. Thanks to the velarium, spectators enjoyed cooling shade, gentle breezes, and softer glare while watching lions stalk criminals. The canopy even improved acoustics, diffusing sound and mellowing the roar of the crowd. It was not just practical. It was a statement. Look, what can be achieved with fabric, rope, and a genuine obsession with public comfort. Modern stadiums boast multi-million-dollar retractable roofs. But Rome had sailors, pulleys, and the right vibe, and the sailors did a remarkably better job. One of the Colosseum's most overlooked engineering feats wasn't its lifts, trapdoors, or ability to flood itself on command, but something far subtler and far more dangerous sound. The Colosseum was designed for 50,000 Romans to hear every scream, roar, shout, and final plea with perfect clarity. Roman architects grasped a truth still elusive to modern stadium designers. Crowds want to hear everything: lashing armor, snarling beasts, the crunch of sand underfoot, and the chilling sound of something large and angry unleashed. Its oval shape funneled sound inward and upward, filling the arena like a bowl of acoustic superblend of cheers, gasps, and the universal Roman call to hit him again. The elliptical form prevented echoes from scattering, instead directing every sound wave clearly to the crowd. Even those in the highest, farthest seats could distinctly hear the sharp breath of a gladiator on the brink of a terrible choice. But shape alone wasn't enough. The stands and passageways were built with arches and vaults acting as sound channels. Stone corridors amplified the crowd's reactions, turning tens of thousands into a resonating thunder. Imagine 50,000 voices raised as one, multiplied by architecture terrifying and unmistakably effective. The velarium played its part here too, softening harsh echoes and bouncing sound back into the arena, creating a surprisingly even acoustic experience. Modern engineers still study this ancient sound system, often with a hint of envy, i.e., ensured every seat caught the drama's full intensity without overwhelming the emperor's delicate ears. Even the arena floor contributed to the soundscape. Beneath the wooden planks, the hypogeum's chambers created subtle reverberations. Every stomp, roar, and clash echoed with theatrical precision. A fact Rome would never admit was deliberate, yet entirely was. The Colosseum was more than a theater of violence. It was an early marvel of audio engineering, designed so every spectator could witness the exact moment a man regretted signing up to be a gladiator, packing 50,000 sweaty Romans, many of whom bathed only when Jupiter personally demanded it tend to a giant stone bowl on a hot summer day presented another problem. Ventilation, a kind, would soon turn into a noxious mix, a kind of human stew. Most ancient civilizations might have accepted this suffering. Rome decided otherwise. The Colosseum was designed to breathe. Air entered through ground-level arches, flowed upward through corridors and staircases, then escaped from the top like a massive stone chimney. Hot air naturally rose, cool air drifted in below. This was convection on a heroic scale, powered by physics and the silent hope that the person next to you wouldn't faint. The seething tiers acted as giant wind funnels, catching breezes, circulating fresh air through the cavernous interior. It wasn't air conditioning, mind you, but it kept the arena from becoming a breathless tomb. The Romans didn't know the word Venturi effect, but they built it into half their buildings. Regardless, they were overachievers with access to volcanic ash, after all. The Valerium also helped, not just in shade, but by directing cooling breezes downward into the stands. Sailors adjusted its ropes carefully. Too flat, and airflow was blocked. It's too steep, and the canopy risked turning into a kite that might pull the whole Colosseum into the Tiber River. The stakes were high. Even the hypogeum played a part. Its labyrinth of tunnels and chambers pushed cool air upward through trapdoors. During events, the arena floor acted like a ventilation grate, blending cooler underground air with the warm air above. It's true, the rising air often carried the scent of sweat, animals, wood smoke, and mild despair, but it was air nonetheless. The result was a stadium that refused to suffocate its audience, even when the weather was merciless, the crowds swelling, and the games brutal. It was not perfect, nor luxurious, but it worked. Rome didn't merely manage airflow, domesticated it. One of history's cosmic jokes is that the Colosseum, after nearly 2 millennia of earthquakes, invasions, lightning strikes, vandalism, gravity, and teenagers carving initials in stone, still stands. Meanwhile, modern apartment buildings crack if someone upstairs sneezes too hard. The difference is not magic. The Romans built as if expecting the earth itself to strike, and it often did. Rome sits on a seismically active region. But the Romans didn't see earthquakes as problems to fear. They saw them as design challenges. The Colosseum's skeleton of arches, vaults, and radial walls formed a web that absorbed shock waves like a giant stone shock absorber. When tremors shook the city, forces dispersed throughout this network rather than concentrating dangerously at one point. Engineers today call this distributed stress response. The Romans called it just another Tuesday. Even the foundation was genius. Beneath the arena lies a massive ring of concrete, some 12 meters thick, reinforced with stone, and designed to grip the earth like a stubborn grandmother refusing to leave her favorite chair. The Colosseum's foundation wasn't rigid stone locked in place. It had enough give to shift slightly without cracking. Think of it as ancient anti-earthquake memory foam, made from volcanic ash and pure engineering confidence. Massive exterior blocks were held together, not by mortar, which tends to crack under pressure, but by iron clamps that acted like skeletal tendons, keeping the whole structure unified. Many of these iron clamps were stolen during the medieval period for weapons and tools, which is why the Colosseum today bears so many scars and missing sections. The building didn't collapse because the earthquakes were stronger than its design. Rather, it crumbled in places because medieval Italians saw free iron and decided to repurpose it. Even with half its structure gone, the Colosseum refuses to fall. It is like a boxer, battered but unbowed, missing an eye, teeth, and ribs, yet still fighting. Rome didn't build just a building. It built a survivor-on enduring stone titan that learned to sway, bend, absorb shock, and outlive the trembling earth beneath it. Beyond engineering marvels like arches, elevators, ventilation, and even the naval battles nobody asked for, the Colosseum served a more subtle and powerful role: psychological warfare. This was no mere stadium. It was an empire-sized intimidation device masquerading as entertainment. Every spectator received the same message. Rome is not just strong, beautiful, or prosperous. No, Rome has wealth, manpower, and enough lions to fill a modest airport. Step out of line and they become feeding time. Its vast size alone dwarfed any other amphitheater, looming like a stone monster, elliptical, and silently judging all who approached, right down to their fashion sense. The exterior was lined with colossal statues of gods, heroes, and emperors, each one a reminder that Rome created greatness and could just as easily unmake you. Inside, the social hierarchy was impossible to ignore. Senators and elite citizens breathed the gladiator sweat in the closest seats, while commoners squinted from the distant nosebleed sections, watching like ants at a battle. Slaves, foreigners, and societies discarded hovered at the top, perhaps wondering why they came at all. Each show was designed to broadcast Rome's absolute control: exotic animals brought from conquered lands to parade power, naval battles reenacting victories, dramatized executions illustrating fate, and gladiator contests glorifying strength and discipline. It was a terrifying message of competence. A government capable of importing tigers from halfway across the world just to throw them at a spear-wielding man is a government you dare not oppose. Even the emperor's presence reinforced this authority as he sat on his throne, visible to tens of thousands, absorbing every cheer, gasp, and scream. The Colosseum was more than architecture. It was a tremor in stone, a psychological weapon etched into the heart of Rome. Despite logic, physics, and all common sense, the Colosseum still stands. Its survival owed partly to Roman engineering brilliance, the concrete, the arches, the foundation, but also to something deeper, almost emotional. It became an icon, embodying human ambition, cruelty, innovation, and resilience. Every stone carries the memory of a civilization that dreamed absurdly big and built structures to match. Today, the city around it has transformed countless times. The Colosseum remains, watching centuries slip by like a bored emperor, waiting for the next performance. Rome never intended the Colosseum to last forever, but it decided to last anyway. It endured countless earthquakes, invasions, vandalism, and time's relentless passage. Medieval builders looted its marble and iron clamps to construct churches, fortifications, and fountains, stripping away entire sections of facade, seating, flooring, and decoration. Yet, the remaining structure still stands like a wounded giant, refusing rest. Through the centuries, it served many roles besides its original purpose: fortress, quarry, shrine, marketplace, shelter, dumping ground, and now tourist attraction, where visitors snap selfies in sandals that cost more than the average Roman's monthly income. Its remaining fragment is still grander and more durable than most modern stadiums. You could level the Colosseum, bury it, burn it, and it would likely shrug, resettle, and become a new kind of landmark. Its longevity is a testament to Roman engineering brilliance and something deeper, a symbol of the stubborn soul of a civilization refusing graceful death. As armor evolved through the Middle Ages, something fascinating happened. By the 13th and 14th centuries, Knights walking tanks, wrapped in metal, began caring about appearance as much as protection. Armor turned from mere equipment into identity, ego, and medieval fashion. Early, subtle engravings blossomed into intricate designs, etched vines, lions, griffins, swords, and religious symbols hammered and chiseled into steel. Knights became instantly recognizable on the battlefield, not by their hidden faces, but by the signature artistry of their armor. This transformation wasn't just vanity. Armor became a social statement, a badge of honor, lineage, wealth, and personal mythology. Workshops specializing in armor making grew into hybrids of smithy and fashion house. Master armorers, celebrated artisans, equal parts engineer, metalsmith, and designer, developed distinct styles and accumulated loyal, noble clientele who refused to appear in anything less than their finest craftsmanship. The Italian city of Milan emerged as a hotspot, crafting smooth, elegant, highly polished armor with tasteful engraving, the medieval equivalent of minimalist luxury. Elsewhere, Germany pioneered Gothic armor with sharp lines, fluting, and intimidating ridges that married form and function, adding strength without weight. By the late Middle Ages, armor had transcended its martial roots to become walking galleries of metal artistry. Each knight's clinking steps were echoes of pride, ego, and expensive taste, far cry from the simple equation of survival that dominated earlier centuries. Master armorers gained fame and influence, some with waits so long a noble might postpone a campaign for months or even years, awaiting a new cuirass. This was armor as identity and spectacle fashion forged in steel. The true magic of medieval armorers lay in their ability to blend stunning beauty with lethal functionality. A Milan breastplate might be adorned with saints and angels, yet it could still deflect a longbow arrow. A German Gothic gauntlet might feature dramatic finger ridges, but it remained deadly in crushing a helmet. The best armor balanced aesthetics with survival, showing that medieval people loved fashion without losing sight of the very real possibility of being stabbed. Master armorers became prestigious figures, their workshops centers of artistry and innovation. Courts revolved around their rivalries and patronage, fueling a flourishing of techniques. Knights walked into battle, knowing their armor was more than forged metal, it was crafted beauty. Heraldry became the medieval logo, boldly painted or embroidered across shields, helmets, and surcoats. Unlike today's uniforms or Snapchat filters, heraldry solved the practical problem of identifying warriors whose faces were hidden behind steel during the chaos of battle. Every symbol, color, and pattern held meaning. Lions spoke of courage, eagles of imperial might, fleurs-de-lis of purity, and sometimes families chose peculiar symbols like 3 dead fish. The crest on a helmet was vital, ranging from subtle carvings to dramatic sculptures like full-sized wooden dragons or giant wings. Imagine charging into battle with a 3-foot wooden swan on your head. Not practical, but undeniably iconic. Heraldry conveyed status, loyalty, and personality. Bright reds and golds for the bold, dark colors, and ominous beasts for the brooding. Heraldry extended beyond armor. Horses, war matching, barding, turning rider and mount into a unified fashion statement. Shields became canvas masterpieces, and lances bore heraldic pennants that announced status or sometimes outright bravado. By the late Middle Ages, heraldry was inseparable from knightly identity. Armor protected the body. Its heraldry projected the soul, or at least the family's public image. Together, they transformed medieval warriors into living symbols in a world where recognition meant survival. As armor transitioned from practical defense to elaborate display, knights embraced decoration techniques like etching, gilding, bluing, and inlay. These required skill, chemistry, and steady hands, often costing as much as a village's annual income. Etching carved detailed patterns, scrollwork, floral motifs, saints, and mythical beasts, sometimes all on one breastplate. Gold and silver inlays added shimmering luxury, that was utterly unnecessary for battle, but indispensable for status. Bluing steel gave a rich cobalt sheen and rust resistance, marrying fashion and function a rare, prized combination. Embossing took decoration further, raising shapes and relief dragons, saints, swirling fabric, forged from steel. By the 15th century, decorated armor was a luxury commodity, equal parts protection, artistry, and medieval flex. Tournament armor, with its heavy decoration and theatrical flair, served not just survival, but prestige and spectacle. Jousts became fashion shows in political theater, where knights dazzled the crowd with vivid colors, towering crests, and elaborate motifs. Ceremonial armor pushed extravagance to new heights. Ornate suits, layered with gold leaf, silver applique, velvet, and enamel, were lighter on protection, but heavier on statement. These suits, expertly crafted in workshops from Milan to Germany, served political and social purposes, playing wealth, power, and heritage. Nobles paraded in armor that declared, "I am powerful, I am stable, I am here." Guards clad in matching ceremonial sets greeted foreign envoys with an intimidating shimmer, signaling that in Rome and beyond, the elite literally glimmered with authority. Kings reveled in such grand displays. Charles V, Maximilian I, Henry VIII commissioned suits of armor that were essentially wearable propaganda, designed to imprint potent images on the minds of both subjects and rivals. Unlike tournament armor, ceremonial suits prioritized mobility over defense. After all, the greatest danger a knight faced at a royal wedding was stumbling on a stone staircase or enduring tedious conversations with detested acquaintances. Yet, despite their lack of battlefield toughness, these suits were crafted with astonishing precision. Artisans dedicated months perfecting symmetrical patterns, details that most spectators would glimpse only from afar. Ceremonial armor didn't save lives, it shaped reputations. Medieval armor was deeply tied to regional identity. Armor was not merely protection, it's cultural expression, forged in steel. An Italian knight looked nothing like a German counterpart, and French nobles carried their own distinctive silhouettes. Italy, particularly Milan, was renowned for sleek, elegant, beautifully contoured armor. Milanese workshops mastered smooth, rounded surfaces that made their suits appear almost fluid. Even practical elements exuded refinement. Their breastplates shone like mirrors, and helmets flowed in graceful curves. Italian armor whispered aristocratic confidence. Yes, I can kill you, but I'll look fabulous doing it. By contrast, Germany embraced Gothic armor, angular, dramatic, and architectural. Tall ridges, deep fluting, pointed sabatons. It looked as though forged by a cathedral builder in a fierce mood. German armorers prized structure and intimidation over softness. A German knight didn't just walk. He loomed, fluting beyond aesthetic, reinforced armor, making it stronger without bulk. So, these designs combined terror and engineering elegance. France struck a balance between elegance and showmanship. Parisian workshops produced armor with tasteful ornamentation, clean lines, and excellent craftsmanship, refined without excess. French knights preferred armor that suggested nobility without screaming it from rooftops. England developed a style blending German robustness and Italian finesse. English nobles favored practicality with selective luxury. Notably, wealthy Englishmen like the Black Prince embraced ornate blackened armor, trimmed in golden medieval equivalent of a perfectly tailored black suit with flashy cufflinks. Even Spain and Eastern Europe cultivated distinct identities. Spanish armor often showcased bold etching and gilding, while Polish armor added dramatic wings because apparently armor needed a flair of theatricality everywhere. Across regions, armor was geography made fashion. By the late Middle Ages, knightly armor was meticulously curated. Case personalization ensured no two suits looked alike. Armor was far from mass-produced. It was sculpted, decorated, and tailored to the owner's personality and artistic vision. Simple adjustments were the start: choosing helmet shape, style of pauldrons, or extra ridges for flare butt customization, quickly escalated. Knights requested fitted cuirasses, emphasizing their torso shape, vamp braces engraved with mottos, greaves patterned after family tapestries. These suits became as uniquely identifiable as fingerprints, though far pricier. Some knights personalized armor purely for aesthetics, seeking shimmer, distinction, and an unmistakable presence. Bluing, gilding, silver inlays, and colored lacquers allowed dramatic contrast. A fully blackened suit with gold filigree could look like a medieval superhero. A silver-polished armor etched with flowers indicated refinement. Crimson accents often declared, "I'm dangerous and fashionable." Others turned armor into biography, writ in steel. Travelers incorporated motifs from multiple regions: Italian scrollwork, German fluting, French filigree. Crusaders engraved scenes from Jerusalem or crosses along helmets. Veterans displayed symbols of triumph, broken lances, captured standards, and fanciful beasts, some likely imaginary. Humor wasn't absent. Some helmets bore snarling faces or strange expressions, granting wearers a permanent battle-ready scowl. Hidden symbols or inside jokes embroidered their suits, medieval luxury jackets with concealed narratives. Function met fashion as personalization optimized performance. Knights altered joints for agility, reinforced favorite fighting styles, and commissioned gauntlets designed for grip. Craftsmanship and ego intertwined. By the 15th century, armor embodied statement, story, legacy, and occasional flex. Over centuries, what began as warrior protection evolved into artistic tradition, melding metallurgy, aesthetics, engineering, heraldry, and unabashed ego. Even after gunpowder rendered plate obsolete on battlefields, armor's style survived in culture, ceremony, and imagination. Renaissance courts preserved armor's prestige. Monarchs like Maximilian I and Charles V commissioned ornate suits long after actual combat ceased. These armors became propaganda, gallery art, and diplomatic gifts. Armor transcended weaponry. It became visual rhetoric. A king clad in gilded armor wasn't preparing for war. He performed authority, projected legitimacy, and reminded all who held the purse strings. In later centuries, nobility treated armor as fine art, displaying suits in halls, museums, and private collections. Families preserved ceremonial armor that never saw a battle, kin to portraits or statues, frozen monuments to medieval craft, and the desire to impress without getting stabbed. Armor's fashion legacy echoes today. Military uniforms, parade dress, and police ceremonial gear draw from medieval plate epaulettes, crests, polished metal lacquering designs crafted centuries earlier. When guards stand proudly in gleaming regalia, they continue a tradition birthed by knights who demanded to look stylish while passing before crowds. Popular culture, too, sustains this legacy. Fantasy films, video games, and novels embrace armor as a central visual motif: heroic breastplates, villainous spikes, ornate elven suits. Artists still find inspiration in Gothic fluting, Milanese curves, and Maximilian ridges. The medieval armorer's imagination shapes modern fantasy aesthetics, proving that even as swords faded, the desire for beauty and identity in steel endured. Ultimately, medieval armor reveals a deeply human truth. Even amidst violence, people sought beauty, identity, and presence. They transformed cold steel not because they had to, but because they could. Armor protected bodies. Fashion immortalized stories. Servants laid out cosmetic palettes and fragrant oils, ready to anoint guests the moment they stepped through the grand villa doors. Beyond the bustling preparations, the noble host ruled with quiet authority, like a miniature pharaoh, choosing which heirlooms to display, which ancestral statues to honor, and which rare delicacies, honeyed cakes, exotic fish, imported wines, which send the clearest message. This house was blessed, wealthy, and favored by the gods. A feast was far more than a meal. It was a performance. Before the first bite reached the lips of Egypt's elite, the entire setting had to speak volumes. The Egyptians believed beauty, order, harmony were reflections of macrocosmic balance that governed the flooding of the Nile, the cycles of the sun, even the beat of a human heart. So, the host did not merely arrange a dining space, it crafted an atmosphere worthy of God's royalty and ancestors alike. Most feasts unfolded in open courtyards or lush garden pavilions where the evening breeze softened the day as heat. Servants tended pools filled with water lilies and lotus blossoms, whose petals opened as the sun slipped behind the groves. These pools were far more than decoration. The flickering torchlight, reflecting on water, symbolized the shimmering fields of the afterlife. Nobles reclining nearby sat symbolically at the edge of eternity, a poetic reminder that life's pleasures, although fleeting, were sacred and meant to be savored. Columns painted with vibrant pigments displayed scenes of protective gods, while blue ceilings imitated the night sky, sprinkled with golden stars. Furniture was carefully arranged, low tables laden with food for close reach, carved wooden chairs for honored guests, cushioned mats for others. Egyptian nobles adored symmetry, and their feasting spaces reflected this obsession. A misplaced cushion or an unevenly spaced jar wasn't mere sloppiness, it was the disruption of cosmic order. Lighting played a vital role. Oil lamps glowed softly in strategic corners. Twilled, towering bronze stands held torches, flickering, dramatically casting dreamlike shadows on murals depicting grand feasts of gods and ancestors gathering alongside the living. Scents were crafted with intent. Incense burners released swirls of frankincense and myrrh, believed to cleanse the space and attract divine favor. Blended with the fragrance of lotus petals, roasted meats, and honey-glazed pastries, the air became a sensory tapestry, inviting, indulgent, and subtly otherworldly. Before the feast began, the host made a careful inspection, adjusting fruit bowl placements, straightening garlands, ensuring the path to the ancestor shrine was clear. Everything had to be perfect, not only for prestige, but because the Egyptians believed the gods themselves might wander among the guests. For the divine presence, nothing less than perfection would do. The feast truly began long before the first tray of roasted goose left the kitchen. It started with the arrival of guests, slow, elegant procession of elites who treated showing up as a ceremony of beauty, hierarchy, and quiet rivalry. Part of the evening's entertainment was the subtle game of radiance. Who shimmered most, wore the finest linen, and had spent the greatest fortune on fragrant oils that smelled like paradise captured in a jar. Hours before sunset, noble men and women bathed in perfumed water infused with lotus petals, exfoliated with natron salts to soften skin to the texture of polished alabaster. Cosmetics were essential, not optional. Thick kohl lined their eyes, shielding them from the sun and lending an air of mysterious allure. Women stained their lips with red ochre, while men scented their chests with blends of myrrh and cinnamon oils. Hairstyles spoke volumes: tight braids, golden beads, elaborate wigs, weighing as much as a newborn calf. Arriving at the villa, guests approached slowly through gateways draped with palm fronds and lotus garlands. Servants greeted them with shallow bowls of fragrant water for washing hands and feet, a ritual symbolizing leaving mortal dust behind and entering a sacred realm of abundance. Clothing mattered greatly. Wealthy nobles wore linen, sheer, and finely woven knit, floated like smoke. Some garments were pleated into intricate zigzags, requiring hours of folding and starch work. Jewelry glittered on wrists, ankles, and necks. Gold bangles, faience beads, lapis lazuli, amulets shaped like scarabs or ankhs. These were not mere accessories, but protective charms, status symbols, and conversational keys. A single gold collar spoke more of lineage and fortune than any speech. Inside, every guest engaged in ritual greetings, bowing before household shrines, murmuring blessings to ancestors, offering prayers for prosperity. Hosts welcomed each personally, moments rich with subtle flattery and discreet rival assessments of fashions. Social status dictated seating arrangements. Experienced nobles could predict the unfolding of hierarchy simply by the host's tone, with courtyards glowing softly, fragrant air swirling, and guests shimmering like living jewels. The stage was set. The feast could begin, and appearances already told half the story. If guests were the jewels of the evening, the food was the crown, lavish, abundant, and deliberately excessive. A noble Egyptian feast was a staged celebration of wealth, abundant harvest, and divine favor. As the first trays arrived, conversations hushed, jaws slackened. Even the most stoic aristocrats admired the spectacle of plenty. The centerpiece was always the roasted goose skin crackling, juices dripping, seasoned with coriander, garlic, and honey glazer. Signed the host, possessed both wealth and impeccable taste. The aroma spread like a divine announcement. Often, whole ducks, quail, or pigeons joined the goose, arranged in decorative patterns, too beautiful to eat, though no one waited long. Fruit bowls overflowed with figs, soft enough to yield to a thumb, cool grapes, baskets stuffed with dates and crushed nuts, and sliced pomegranates, the ruby gems of life and rebirth. Children believed the gods hid blessings in every seed. Adults pretended it was mere tradition. Sweetness marked wealth. Honey, precious and hard to produce, coated pastries, flavored sauces, and dripped generously over fruit. Honey cakes shaped like animals or lotus blossoms gleamed golden and glossy. These sweets weren't just pleasure. They proclaimed the household's access to the Nile's finest ingredients. Vegetables and breads filled gaps, barley bread, braided or baked into animal shapes, crusts sprinkled with sesame or flax seeds. Lentils, chickpeas, cucumbers, leeks, and radishes appeared in alabaster or polished wood bowls. Even simple bean pastes were elevated with herbs and oils, ensuring no dish was ordinary. Drinks wine infused with lotus petals, spiced date wine, fine beers brewed from emmer wheats circulated freely. Servants kept cups filled in respect to living and the honored dead. Before toasts were made, the feast already told its story. This house thrives. This family is blessed. Tonight, every guest will feast like gods. Wine and beer were more than refreshment. They bore ritual, celebration, sensuality, and spiritual meaning. The moment a servant poured the first cup, the banquet transformed into an offering for gods, ancestors, and unseen spirits mingling among the living. Lotus wine was the star more than a drink, a symbol of divine rebirth. Like the flower that closed at night and opened with dawn, the wine mirrored life, death, and resurrection cycles. Its subtle floral aroma and faint blue tint evoked Egypt's sacred river. Guests sipped slowly, savoring cosmic renewal's whisper in every mouthful. Varied wines, from tart pomegranate to rich, syrupy date blends infused with herbs, coriander, and desert mint danced between medicinal and indulgent. Beer, the true heartbeat of Egyptian drinking culture, smoother and richer than the everyday kind, filtered carefully and often sweetened with honey or spices. It symbolized nourishment and abundance from the grain-yielding Nile floods. Servants refilled cups diligently, ensuring no guest ever suffered empty vessels. Drinking rituals honored ancestors and gods, the goddess Hathor, patroness of joy and music, and Osiris, lord of rebirth, featured prominently. Guests toasted with reverence, pouring drops on the ground for spirits, celebrating life and death intertwined. In lamplit glow, petals floating on wine, the feast blurred boundaries between earthly delight and divine blessing. As the meal unfolded, the atmosphere transcended sustenance. It became a sensory performance, an indulgence of sight, scent, sound, and taste, a sacred celebration of life's fleeting beauty. Music and dance in ancient Egypt were not mere entertainment. They were sacred arts, believed to please the gods, honor ancestors, and bind the living in joy and harmony. For nobles, A feast without music would have felt as hollow as a banquet table without bread. Musicians entered the courtyard with quiet confidence, carrying harps taller than a child, delicate flutes carved from reed, and small hand drums capable of stirring even the most stoic official. These musicians were revered artisans, often trained from childhood to master the subtle emotional language of Egyptian music. A single harp note might express celebration or longing, while a rhythmic shift from the sistrum, the sacred rattle tied to the goddess, Hathor, could shift the entire feast from casual chatter to spiritual reverence. Hathor, goddess of beauty, dance, music, and joy, hovered over the evening like a warm breeze. Many feasts included dancers who invoked her through their movements, adorned with gold beads, slender anklets, and perfumed oils catching lamplight. These dances blended sensuality with grace. Their choreography flowed slowly and fluidly, with arm motions resembling rippling water, footwork echoing drum rhythms, and gentle body undulations inspired by the Nile's own graceful flow. The audience didn't just watch. They became active participants, swaying to rhythms, snapping fingers, murmuring blessings as dancers passed. Dancers often performed near ancestor shrines, with guests believing that the departed enjoyed music as much as the living. Even simple acts like clapping or whispering praise were devotion. Musicians carefully shifted melodies to guide the evening's emotional journey. Right rhythms welcomed new dishes, softer tones invited storytelling or flirtation, and drum bursts announced honored guests or lavish delicacies. By evening's peak, music and dance wove into the feast's fabric like golden threads through fine linen. Behind every grand banquet stood an army of trained servants, cooks, cupbearers, dancers, incense bearers, and attendants moving with silent efficiency, ensuring a seamless flow. Once guests reclined on cushioned mats or ivory-laid chairs, cupbearers circulated lotus wine and spiced beer, bowing before refilling cups, an unspoken rule against leaving vessels empty, as that implied disrespect. Food servers arrived in disciplined lines carrying trays of honeyed pastries, roasted meats, figs, cucumbers, and delicately stewed dishes. Each tray was tilted just right to catch lamplight, making the food visually irresistible. Servants alternated between serving and narrating origins, dates from the Fayum, honey from temple hives, fish fresh from the Delta, culinary storytelling, designed to showcase the host's resources and reach. Certain rituals transformed the feast from social event to sacred moment. Before major courses, incense bearers circled the courtyard, releasing frankincense and myrrh to purify the air and draw benevolent spirits. Guests lifted heads slightly, acknowledging the unseen world joining the celebration. Hand-washing attendants knelt with alabaster bowls of scented water, lotus oil floating atop, symbolizing renewal, gratitude, and commitment to cosmic harmony. Entertainment relied on precise teamwork. Musicians shifted rhythms to cue dancers' entrances. Storytellers waited for servers to finish before dramatic recitations. The servants' choreography made the evening feel effortless, though built on months of training and centuries of tradition, reflecting the household's true sophistication. As food flowed, music swelled, and wine loosened grips, the feast's true purpose revealed itself: conversation. These gatherings went beyond indulgence. They were arenas of diplomacy, subtle competition, and social maneuvering. Beneath laughter and elegance, every word carried weight. Nobles leaned close to exchange greetings, layered with meaning. Compliments on linen signified wealth. Praise of jewelry nodded to family influence. And even greetings revealed political allegiance. Egyptians were masters of grace and subtlety. Conversations drifted between Nile flood levels, temple festivals, court rumors, and whispered opinions. Cates became fertile ground for quiet negotiations, advancing sons in priesthood, securing marriages, and forming alliances. Flirtation blossomed amid candles and perfume, the glow of lamplight mingling with kohl-lined eyes, whispered jokes, and shared cups. Poetry extolled the power of romantic tension, comparing beauty stirred by music to a lotus blooming at dusk. Storytelling added social texture. Others recounted heroic ancestors, bountiful harvests, and divine encounters, quiet affirmations of family prestige. Younger nobles told humorous, exaggerated travel tales, hoping to impress. A well-timed story lifted a person's standing. A poor one risked social sinking. Scribes observed all, noting alliances forming or fracturing. Hosting a feast was political theater. The guest list alone revealed who rose or fell in the host's favor. Throughout, guests maintained calm and poise, reflecting nobility's value for grace under pressure. Cups clinked, laughter rose, dancers swayed, and beneath it all, the currents of power shifted quietly. A feast nourished bodies and fed ambitions. As honey cakes and fig pastries vanished, the tone shifted from display to intimacy and spirituality. Ancient Egyptians did not separate the sacred from the everyday, especially not in banquet halls. Food, music, flowers, and laughter were offerings to gods and tributes to ancestors shaping family destinies. The music softened and dancers rested. Priests or elders approached household shrines, small altars dedicated to ancestors or protective deities near the courtyard, glowing in flickering oil light. Trays of leftover fruits, breads, wine, and roasted meats were carried forward, nothing wasted, everything meaningful. Offering food to spirits allowed them to share abundance. The dead were believed to influence the living's fortune, so honoring them sustained manat, cosmic harmony. Guests watched reverently as incense smoke spiraled skyward, mingling with the fading scents of feast aromas, a final reminder of richness. Silent blessings followed, some whispered prayers for fertility, prosperity, safe journeys, or health. The banquet, which began socially, now felt like communion with eternity. After offerings, the air lightened. Servants brought fresh water for symbolic cleansing. Spirits warmed by wine and contentment. Guests resumed soft conversations. Laughter mellowed into stories, praise of the host's generosity, echoing political meaning. Compliments late in the evening blossomed into alliances, friendships, or advantageous agreements by morning. As the final lamps dimmed and guests began to depart, each left carrying far more than a full stomach. They carried memories, strengthened bonds, and the shared sense that they had been part of something larger than themselves. A noble feast was never merely a night of indulgence. It was a renewal of social harmony, a reaffirmation of divine favor, and a reminder that life, like the lotus flower, was both fleeting and sacred. The courtyard quieted beneath stars shimmering over the Nile in the peaceful afterglow. The household knew it had honored gods, ancestors, and guests, alike fulfilling the timeless purpose of an Egyptian noble feast. Before the rise of the Odrysian kingdom, Thrace was a land of raw beauty and danger, of vast frontier, stretching from the Aegean Sea to the Danube. Dense forests, roaring rivers, sacred mountains, and gold-bearing streams sparkling under the sun shaped a wild landscape. To outsiders, Thrace seemed wilderness. To its people, it was a living force that hardened those who dwelt there and rewarded those strong enough to claim dominion. Unlike kingdoms ruled by kings or cities, Thrace was fragmented into dozens of tribes, each with chieftains, customs, symbols, and fierce pride. The Bessi controlled mountain passes, whispering prophecies to Dionysian priests. The Trubali roamed the plains like wolves. The Gedi worshipped Zalmoxes and viewed death as a mere passage. The Odrysians, proud and ambitious, dreamed bigger than their neighbors. Renowned across the ancient world for ferocity, Thracian warriors fought barefoot, sprinting across jagged terrain, wielding curved swords, the deadly ramphaia, the cleaved shields and bone. Tattooed, wearing foxskin caps, drinking strong, undiluted wine. Their wildness repelled more refined Greek sensibilities. Yet, for all their strength, the tribes lacked unity. Each clan was fiercely independent and suspicious of the others. Alliances flickered and faded swiftly. Lone tribes were fierce, embers, bright and hot, but too scattered to unite. This fragmentation left them vulnerable to foreign influence, Greeks bribing chieftains for mine access, Persians securing footholds for armies. Everyone sought Thracian wealth, yet none could speak for all. Amid this chaos, change was stirring. Trade routes extended. Gold flowed from the Hebros River. Horses were bred in numbers, rivaling any region. And the Odrysians grew wealthier and more powerful. The land was ripe for ambition and unity, waiting for a leader to kindle the embers. Into this fractured world steps Teres, scion of the Odrysian line, destined to be Thrace's first great unifier. His world was a labyrinth of clan wars, blood feuds, and tribal pride, so entrenched unity seemed impossible. But Teres saw a vision few could. Thrace could be more than restless clans. It could be a kingdom commanding respect from Persia and Athens. Unlike typical chieftains who lived for battle and pillage, Teres was a strategist and diplomat. He knew strength alone wouldn't unite tribes. It needed shared identity, wealth, and purpose. His first task was forging alliances, using gold and horses, the most sacred Thracian currencies, to win some, marriage to bind others, and force to subdue the rest. Opponents realized fighting Teres meant facing all his allies, losing battle. With each bond formed, his power surged. Teres created what no Thracian leader had, a loyalty network spanning plains and valleys. Former rivals now contributed soldiers and resources to a rising power, the embryonic Odrysian kingdom. Understanding trade's role, he positioned his state along crucial routes linking the Danube to the Aegean, the Black Sea to Macedonian Greek colonies. Coastal Greeks now negotiated with a single authority, shifting the balance of power. By declaring himself king, Teres transformed scattered embers into a growing flame, united, driven by shared ambition, and led by a visionary. His army was a fearsome mix of swift, light infantry wielding javelins, crescent shields, and the deadly rhomphaea, capable of shattering Greek phalanxes. Thracian horsemen, famed for their skill, hunted like ghosts riding bareback, losing arrows and striking unpredictably. Yet Teres weaponized wildness with disciplined warrior bands coordinated under unified tactics. Chiefs, once independent, now led integrated units. Impulsive charges became commanded assaults. Warriors flocked to the Odrysian king, inspired by promises of plunder, honor, and merit-based advancement. Teres' new power rested on wealth. Thrace's rich gold veins, once coveted by Greeks, now fell under royal control. He leveraged these to negotiate trade, importing bronze weapons, pottery, luxury goods, inspiring tribal respect. Horses were prized status symbols, noble prestige measured by herds. Diplomatic gifts often took the form of fine horses. Trade flourished, with merchants flocking to Odrysian markets. The king imposed structured tributes, replacing chaotic raids with regular taxes in livestock, grain, warriors, and metals. This income funded loyal armies, lavish feasts, and a stable kingdom. Through economic power and diplomacy, Teres forged a unity brute force alone never achieved the foundation for a lasting state. The Odrysian kingdom became far more than just a military confederation. It blossomed into an economic powerhouse that rivaled its Greek and Persian neighbors. With wealth flowing steadily into the royal coffers, Teres could finally turn his attention outward, navigating the complex geopolitical world, standing between the mighty Achaemenid Persian Empire to the east and the rivalrous Greek city-states to the south. Thrace was no longer just a crossroads, but a battlefield of influence, alliances, bribes, threats, and subtle diplomacy. Instead of feeling intimidated, Teres played the diplomatic game with seasoned skill. For decades, Persia regarded Thrace as a frontier ripe for control. Kings like Darius and Xerxes marched armies through Thracian lands, forcing tribes to submit or provide troops. While many chieftains yielded, Teres changed the rules. He negotiated instead of resisting blindly, recognizing that Persia respected strength above flattery, offering warriors as elite mercenaries in Persian campaigns. Thracian fighters earned fame and gold across Asia Minor. Yet Teres maintained the Odrysian heartland's independence, cooperating just enough to avoid invasion while keeping Persia at arm's length. Persia saw a useful ally. Teres saw a temporary arrangement. Relations with the Greeks were more complicated. Their commerce enriched Thrace's treasury, but Greek political rivalries, Athens, Sparta, Thasos, Macedon, threatened the kingdom's unity. Teres's genius was in pitting them against each other, selling grain and horses to Athens at a price, pressuring Thasos through trade routes, supporting Macedon's rivals. He accepted Greek ambassadors with lavish hospitality, while quietly expanding Odrysian influence deeper into the Balkans. By staying unpredictable and neutral, Teres kept Thrace too valuable to attack and too strong to bully. Greeks learned risking Odrysian wrath was perilous. Persians feared united tribes rising. Under Teres, the Odrysian kingdom was no mere tribal alliance. It matured into a state with a vibrant royal court. Feasts, sacred rituals, diplomacy, and elite culture, impressing even jaded foreigners. Odrysian feasts were legendary spectacles, thunderous, extravagant, where gold cups clinked, horsemen boasted victories, poets recited tribal histories, kings displayed untold wealth. Generosity was king's obligation, serving roasted boar, venison, honeyed bread, cheeses, and river fish. Stinginess was seen as a curse, lavishness a divine blessing. Wine flowed potent and unmixed, a sharp contrast to Greek custom. These feasts were more than celebrations. They forged loyalty, reaffirmed bonds, and settled disputes. A horse of exceptional breeding, a fox fur cloak, or a golden torque could turn foes into allies. Religion and politics blended seamlessly. The Odrysians honored deities like the great rider, the mother goddess, and Zalmoxis, mysterious master of life and death. Priests and shamans played pivotal roles in ceremonies, forming sacred fires, sacrifices, and reading omens to confirm divine approval of the king's decisions. The royal court became a diplomatic hub. Greek envoys, Macedonian nobles, and Persian agents marveled at carved wooden halls adorned with animal motifs, gold and silver treasures, and nobles clad in patterned cloaks and fine jewelry. Music echoed through halls from flutes, lyres, and drums, accompanied by dances blending athleticism and tribal symbols. Odrysian culture thus grew beyond military might into a powerful cultural force. Teres understood kingdoms survived not solely by sword, but by cultivating identity, pride, and shared purpose. Teres transformed raw tribal energy into a functioning political system, the first organized state in the Balkans. It's not merely a collection of chieftains united under a warlord. The Odrysian kingdom had royal hierarchy, administrative networks, and control mechanisms. At its pinnacle stood the king, a ruler whose authority stretched for hundreds of miles. Royal halls and sacred groves hosted the court, where commands were issued, envoys received, and disputes settled. Kingship was never automatic. It was earned through displays of strength, wealth, generosity, and divine legitimacy. The king was warrior, priest, and judge. To govern effectively, Teres built loyal, noble networks, powerful tribal lords bound by oaths, marriages, and gifts. They policed realms, collected tributes, raised troops, extending royal power far beyond palace walls. Tribute grain, livestock, gold, furs, slaves, cost. Horses bolstered the economy, fueling rewards, military maintenance, and royal influence. Odrysian law was unwritten, rooted in tradition, honor, hospitality, and vengeance elevated by the crown's new expectations of loyalty, obedience, and punishment for treason. Royal messengers and chieftains maintained communication and order across the realm like cogs in a vast machine. Infrastructure tied tribes together, roads maintained, rivers patrolled, safe passage ensured. Foreign powers quickly acknowledged Odrysian transformation. Greeks praised their resilience, Persians recognized a political force, and Macedonians regarded them with respect and caution. By the height of Thracian's reign, the Odrysian kingdom emerged as a rising geopolitical power, extending from the Aegean to the Danube, the Black Sea to the Hebrews valleys. Expansion came through diplomacy, absorption, and force. Some tribes joined willingly, drawn by wealth and protection. Others were subdued in campaigns, etched into Thracian memory. The kingdom's emblem, mounted warrior with raised spear, became a symbol known from Byzantium to Pella. Odrysian cavalry and infantry grew from Metabola terror to neighbors. Even Greek historian Herodotus remarked that unified Thracians could dominate the world. Thrace left a lasting legacy, a cultural, military, and political powerhouse that shaped Balkan history. His son's saddles expanded borders, deepened diplomatic ties, and cemented Odrysian status as power players. Thrace was no longer a fractured frontier, but a kingdom united by ambition, wealth, and identity, capable of projecting influence and commanding respect among ancient superpowers. The Odrysian kingdom's golden treasures, heroic legends, and cultural fusion endured beyond its political fracture, inspiring future leaders and reshaping the ancient world's map. Its legacy was more than conquest, was the spark of statehood and unity in southeastern Europe.